Okay, so if you're watching this video, then that means you've already done your Jelly Bean data for your group. What I want you to do is I want you to pause the video, and in your notebook I want you to draw something that looks like these three graphs. So the first one doesn't have to have the exact same number of dots, but I want it to have the general appearance of that graph. And then I want you to do the same for the second one and the same for the third one. So if you need to pause the video and make them look as close to these that I have on my notebook as you can, then do that now. Today we're going to talk about the distribution of data. Distribution talks about how it's spread out or how it looks visually. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk for just a second about how these appear to us. So I've grabbed a marker, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw just a general appearance of what the graph looks like. So you can see how this one, I didn't go through any of the dots. I just kind of drew a general, this is what the graph looks like. I'm going to do the same thing for this one. So that one kind of looks like that. And then this one goes up and then back down. So we're going to talk for just a few minutes about what do these appearances mean to me. This one, if you notice, it looks like there's a large cluster of data on the left side of the graph. And then we have this area here where it looks like there isn't much. So this one has a very important name. It's called a right skew graph because we have a long right tail. This is called the tail of the graph. This is a long right tail of the distribution of the data. Now, sometimes these are called positive skew, and that's because the long tail is growing in the positive direction on the number line. So right skew means we have a long right tail. The graph leans to the left, which can be a little confusing. I know in the past we've had issues where students think that because it leans to the left, that means that this is a left skewed graph, but actually it's kind of the opposite of what you would expect. Because we're missing this graph information here and the long tail tends to be leading towards the right, it's called right skew. This one, if you notice this one looks kind of like a mountain, and it almost appears as if I drew a line right down the middle of my graph, that graph would be the same on the left as it is on the right. Now that's not always the case with the actual data itself, but it sort of kind of looks like it. And so this one is known as a normal distribution or a symmetrical. All of these words mean the same thing, of course, when we're talking about the distribution. Or sometimes they'll even say it has no skew. This means that we have no tails, and it just means that the tails on the graph appear to be exactly the same. The left tail appears to be pretty much the same as the right tail. The last graph that you drew looks something like this, and you're going to notice that the tail on the left side of the graph is the longest, and the tail on the right side of the graph is much shorter. So this is called a left skew graph or a skew left graph, and that means that we have a long left tail. So the tail with the longest section is the one here on the left. Now sometimes this can be called a negative skew. Because the long tail is leading in the negative direction on the number line. So I just wanted you to have that information so that you would understand what the distribution of data can tell you about a graph. And then we will use that later on as we talk about measures of central tendency.